Welcome, everybody, to our new Sacred Self Healing series here for the rest of the year 2022 Self Mastery series, starting with part one, Mastering Our Thinking. And this has to do with the series that we had last month, the Karmic Manifestation series, where, or last, since the beginning of the year, where we uncovered and examined um, all the different factors that play into our manifestation process and what can work against it. And the bottom line here, where we arrived in June, was that it's important that we understand how to master our own senses, our own thinking, our own emoting, the conclusions that we arrive to that form the framework for how we are seeing the world, how we're seeing ourselves, and the life that we want to manifest. And this is now where we get into the nitty gritty, something that I will probably turn into a course, because it is so essential for all of us, and especially for you as energetically sensitives, because when we come to the energetic aspects of self-mastery, we will see that things can be quite more complex than we think they are. So the terms that we are covering here are thoughts and thinkingness. Yeah, so in the tradition of our sacred self-healing workshops, we want to learn to discern and differentiate. There is a big difference between having a thought and thinking. Yeah, we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about the difference of emotions and feelings. We're going to talk about the difference between expressions and communication, not just the differences, but also where they link into another, goals and expectations, what the difference is between conscious choice and will, and how they link together. And then last but not least, in December, we're going to be talking about spiritual visioning and what the goal of this sort of evolutionary development of self-mastery skills, where that leads to. And here a little bit of a preface. If you have listened to the spiritual visioning energy talk from Wednesday, I kind of gave a good intro there already. Being able to tap into energies, being able to see energies, being able to envision things are not a guarantee for wisdom, and definitely not a guarantee for making better choices in life. So there is a practical component that has nothing to do with our knowledge. Okay, you all know this, right? How many times are we making choices against better knowing or better knowledge? And this is why we need to investigate the differences between what we know, what we think, what our thoughts are, before we can even talk about some of the spiritual aspects. Because for as long as we don't know how our own thinking works, we cannot uncover the deeper aspects of our visioning. This is a spiritual reality. This is very important for all of us to understand. And at this point, I want to ask all of you spontaneously what comes up for you when you hear my words, when I say these things. Yeah, that, for example, our spiritual knowing, our spiritual, sort of impulses and our, inclinations, how they can serve us and how they can also work against us if there is no good framework for, say, what it is that we are perceiving. Who of you has had experiences, where your ability to tap into energies or tap into, say, more spiritual or energetic things has provided you with information, but hasn't really helped you, or perhaps, even misled you. Linda, your thought was, yikes. Okay, would you like to comment on this into the microphone? Why? Why?
Well, particularly on the Wednesday session, and then as you bring it up now, I thought that, as I'm going through my day to day, I don't count on the thoughts that come in and out of my head. But I did think that once I was focused and grounded and really asking through my heart, that the messages were safe to take. So that's my yikes.
So did I just understand this right? It's basically the question, which of your thoughts you can trust and which you can't trust. Is that what you mean? Is it
Yeah.
you just assumed that you could trust your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that if I was grounded and coming from my heart, that I could trust that.
All right, this is a really good point, and I don't want to comment too much on that. I would rather have other people comment on that, because this is such a big problem for us, right?
Jona,
Yes.
this is Janet. Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
Janet.
The first thing that I noticed after you asked the question is that for like so many years being involved with paying attention to inner prompts or dreams, or really all these years learning the vast variety and depth of what we possibly can pick up, that the best way that I've been guided with it has been, I find, perceptively internal, and also I feel like there's a lot in shaping my ability to stick to values and virtues in everyday life. I feel like it is kind of like not what we might expect. Like, well, sometimes, I mean, I've had visions where it's been, oh, I've been in a car or in a building, and understanding what those mean, and then how to apply that kind of communication into something that I might be able to interpret and
And
recognize.
used and used in the practical, right? Like, oh, okay,
Yeah, but
this is
it's not
not
like,
safe, or
oh, I haven't had, oh, there's going to be a volcano today in Mexico City, or you're going to drive by a volcano in Mexico City when you're flying back from this place. You know, we kind of, I don't think I had the expectation, but I can sense that there's a lot of it as well. But I feel like they're very subtle, but very pertinent things, of course, because they're the things that we each need to hear individually. So that's how I put value on it and continue to work with it, I guess.
yeah. So I like your input, Janet, because it's not that simple. It's we can't just say we can trust everything, or nothing. It doesn't work this way. A lot of that has to do with practice. You said that, right? And you spent a lot of time with this, and we often sort of run into this idea that everything, say, that comes forward when we meditate, or when we are, like Linda said, when we are in a grounded place, is well, I mean, I don't want to say trustworthy, but is something that comes from our deeper self or from our higher self. This is not a true statement. Okay. Now, there is a tendency, and this is what we need to get used to, because we're dealing in non-linear realms when it comes to thinking, even if science wants to see it differently. Yeah, realms and fields, those are things that cannot really be defined in a linear way. You cannot say every time you get this sensation in your belly, it means that fill in the blank, right? That you're not safe. Or every time you get this beautiful feeling of, expansion in your, whatever body part, it always means that. It's not the case. So what we will learn, and this is the part here that really needs to hit home with us, is that we actually never been taught the mechanics of thinking. We have been taught to memorize. We have been taught to, basically come to conclusions that are based on preformed views. Yeah, and this is not a criticism, guys. This is just a fact, okay, that we have been taught, to have certain thoughts and to form a certain framework out of these thoughts. And the thing that proves that is that when you look at different societies, different ethnic groups and so forth, that you can see differences there. Those are all humans. They all have the same brain. They all have the same capacity. And yet, depending on the framework that was taught to them, they have different thoughts and different ways of thinking. So it's not that simple, to just say, oh, okay, like everything that comes from there is bad, everything that comes from there is good. We have to understand that, like you said, Janet, that the way we process our thoughts is kind of like our personal individual operating system. Yeah. And if I feel a little twitch in my pinky finger, okay, it means something completely different to me than it does to each and every one of you. Yeah. And if I see a color or shape, or if I have a premonition or a vision, it never means the same to you that it does to me. Why? Why is that? Let's go into those questions, because as I have mentioned in the energy talk on Wednesday, it is the moment that you start questioning your own agenda, your own conclusions, and to a certain degree also your own thoughts, when we speak of an awakening, the awakening of individualized consciousness in a person. And this sounds kind of scary in a way, but I want all of you to become aware of this. It isn't until you question your own thoughts, your own thinking, and your own mindsets that you can truly call yourself awakened. And there's nothing mystical here yet, right? The mystical is a part of the awakening process, but it is not the important part. Yeah, so it's just like, when you think back in sort of tribal societies, and you know nothing about science, and you look at weather, and weather is a big mystery to you. Yeah, you know nothing about volcanoes, or you know nothing about tornadoes, and you see these weather phenomenon. Yeah, and they're a mystery to you. Okay, and the contextualization then depends on the way the people were taught to think. Whether it is, like sort of the wrath of God, that you're experiencing there, or whether it is a phenomenon that's based on a certain other conditions, say temperature and wind conditions, or whether it's a certain geological phenomenon and so forth, you would know this. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in the science of consciousness development, there are very interesting investigations, very interesting studies that are being done there. And there is a few societies on this planet that do not have a concept of math and numbers. Did you guys know that? And that creates a very interesting development linguistically for these people, because if you don't have a word for, like, say, 1 or 2 or 3, what happens is that you're going to have to find different ways to express, for example, greater than or less than. You're going to have to talk in ways that are relative. Yeah, you have to always relate it or compare it to something else. So just the fact that this is actually there, that this exists, should teach us something. Namely, that there are a lot of things that we are taking for granted. There are a lot of things that, just sort of work in us like an operating system, that we are, making our decisions based on, that we've never questioned. Like, why am I thinking this? Yeah, how do I know that this is truly, sort of my own insight or for my own good? How do I know that? Yeah, so these kind of questions are what we call, sort of the first signs of awakening. And they also happen to be the first sort of entry points into self-mastery. Because until we question how we think and what we think, and then later the conclusions that we come to based on our thinking and the expressions, and sort of how we then go out into the world and, act according to those, conclusions and expressions, we are technically and practically unconscious. We are just following a program, okay? And that is not not something that somebody has implanted in us. Yeah, so there's, a lot of evidence that obviously our system, the way we are built, the way we are designed, learns through, copying, through examples, through copying what, like say, the grown-ups do. There's a part of us that has preoccupations based on, what the current belief system is in that society that we grow up in. Religions is a good example. And there's an element of, doing things based on our personal experiences. And so as we grow up, into adulthood, we form a framework that is more or less determined by external factors. And the reason why this is it's easy to explain, is that when a human that has the capacity to think for himself or herself doesn't get there, they still have to have the ability to survive. And that's also then the key to understanding our ego, because the ego is the part of us, of our psyche, that fills in the gap until we awaken to our consciousness. And the moment we do awaken is when we begin to identify the ego. That's when the questions arise. I don't know about you guys. I had many moments in my life where I struggled with the fact that I have consciousness, where a part of me was kicking and screaming and whining, and where I was literally wishing back the times where I was completely unaware of all these things, and I just didn't want to know. You guys know what I'm talking about? Anybody ever had that? Like you wish you wouldn't know? Yes.
Well, you know what, Jona, I've noticed this. I've noticed it prior, and sometimes it gets washed away. And then, like I had mentioned in the Skype chat, I had connected with this precognition group. It was, nothing special, but it was just it really struck me when I started to do one of the exercises. It just came in that part of me somewhere, or somebody else, really, really, really was covering up my intuition. I could just feel it deep inside me. You have been, your connection with the higher knowing has been interrupted. So sometimes I'm thinking, when I slip out of it or not able to access with it, sometimes it's like, oh, maybe I don't want to see it. Maybe I don't really want to see clearly, and I question it. And then other times it just happens. I don't. When I was
That's
younger,
a
I think when
yeah.
I was younger, I could see where I probably just had a little switch. I just flipped off and was like, I can't take anymore, and that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's shed a little bit more light into this as we go. How much of our thinking is ours and how much isn't? And is there what factors can shut that down? Yeah, and how much of that can we control? Um, these are things that we will cover here in the energetic component of thinking, and also, you know, sort of what these things are that lead to self-deception. Okay, because self-deception is pretty much when our thinking is either working against ourselves or you know, when we adopt such as mind control. Mind control is always a way to convince a person that they are thinking it themselves. Yeah. So as opposed to, like, say, imprisonment or slavery, right? Imprisonment and slavery, you being physically forced to do something. Yeah, there's no question marks about that. And if you don't do it, you get beaten up or whatever, or punished. Mind control functions on the basis of convincing the person or coercing or persuading the person into believing something that they then convince themselves with, right? That's why this is such a big topic nowadays, you know, in the age of information and disinformation. And this is also the reason why we're having this workshop and why we need to investigate those things, because this is a real problem nowadays. Yeah, in the energy talk, I talked about, you know, the age of information, and we never had that much information available, or you know, that we never had access to so much information. That's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is also that in times of transition, change, transformation, whatever you want to call this, yeah, that people are looking for answers outside of themselves, and that makes them particularly vulnerable to mind control. Yeah, if you think of like sort of a more sort of moderate or a modest lifestyle, you know, where you have, say, you're a farmer or a sheep shepherd, and you know, your life is pretty clear. You know, you take care of your plants or your animals, and you have a daily structure, and you know exactly what to expect and so forth. You're not really that susceptible to outer things, whether or not the sheep or the sheep herding is good for you is a whole different question. But the point is that because we are changing our habits into, you know, being more distractible, yeah, and surrounded by so much more information, we have to assume that our thinking also gets contaminated more. Yeah. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? I'm not pointing at any particular entity or organization or anything like that. It's just the fact that we are more susceptible because we are seeking more information. Yeah. And one of the reasons why we sometimes have this nostalgia about, you know, when we were younger or when we were innocent, right, was that we simply didn't know much. And there is something like an idyllic sort of ego piece there. Yeah, if you know, I don't care for what I don't know. Do you guys know what I mean? And the ego sometimes comes in that way, that, you know, it resists this deeper kind of investigation. It doesn't want to change mindsets. It doesn't want to change the framework, because if you do, it's like a major sort of software update operation. Yeah, because you pretty much have to change everything along with it, especially your values. One of you mentioned this. I think, Janet, you mentioned this. The values, what we value, what we see as important in life, how we weigh or how we prioritize things in life, yeah, and with it also our needs and wants, depends on the framework. how we see things, and how we see things depends on our perspective. And every time we change the way we see things, well, then our perspective changes. And when our perspective changes, our perception changes. And with it, our choices. And that is what we're experiencing right now, sort of as a collective, sort of common experience, namely that we have to change something. We have to know what we're thinking, and we have to know how we're thinking. We have to know how mindsets in us have formed. We have to know what mindsets we want to keep and which we don't want to keep. We have to inform ourselves about things such as the collective unconscious, outer energies, outer thoughts that may, influence the way we think, or that may influence our frameworks. We still have the choice, but we need to be able to make informed choices. We have to understand how our thinking influences the rest of our being. We have to know how to discern. Without the ability to discern, we don't know what truth is. And without knowing what truth is, we don't know what love and freedom are. That's how simple that is. So if someone wakes up to the awareness that they want higher goals in life, we need to walk these steps first. How do you know that is a higher goal? How do you know that that's better for you? I'm not talking like someone who, tells others what their higher goals should be. But I can tell you that, 99% of people in the world pretty much have the same higher goals. Do you guys know what sort of the most common higher goals of people are? Let's do a little bit of brainstorming here. What are higher goals of humans? Love, yes. And Linda, not just love itself. Differentiate a little more. I mean, you can speak into the microphone for these kind of things. It's maybe easier because we have to use a lot of words to describe what we mean. Yeah, Julianne is saying living in a state of harmony and inner peace. Why am I not accepting just the word love? Because we all know that there is issues with love, right? So what kind of love? Or is it actually the relationships that we're referring to? What exactly about love is it that we form as higher goal? Yes, balance. Julian, yeah. Yeah, no, oops, sorry, there's a siren here in the background. So what do you mean when you say love?
To me, it isn't the relationship kind of love, but more sort of a peace and knowing, both internal and external, and sort of a way to relate.
Okay, I like what you said when you said a way to relate. A way to relate actually points at relationships, right? So you can hear this in the words. Yeah. So all the ways that we relate to another or with another, we call that relationship. They're not just a romantic relationship, the with the partner, with all of the people or things, such as nature or animals that we are relating to. Now, the aspect of knowing, Linda, can you stay with me here? Because that was very important. You said something very important there. You said, yes, I think you commented here, knowing what? That the love is true.
Yeah, true. So
That is,
knowing the truth.
yeah, so you see there's a connection here. You just uncovered a connection between truth and love, right? Because it's not just enough to have any kind of love. Obviously, we all want, per sort of program, you know, we want to be loved, or we want to feel validated, we want to feel liked. Yeah, that is sort of the lower expression of love. That is a pre-programmed survival instinct in us humans. That if we are loved, yeah, then we have connections. When we have connections, our survival chances are higher. This sounds a bit de-romanticizing, but that is actually the case. So the fundamental drive, yeah, to be and connect and relate with other people is pre-programmed into us. Yeah, because we are not designed to be solitary beings. We are not, humans cannot survive on their own. That's very important to understand. And it's not just humans, it's a lot of mammals, you know, and some birds and so forth. And, you know, every species has a sort of a higher developed version. And the higher developed the version of the species is, the more it depends on collaboration to survive. That's not necessarily a bad thing. From neuroscience, we know that it requires a much higher developed brain and, you know, a nervous system, yeah, to collaborate. So that's why you find solitary beings, and entirely solitary beings, in the lower rankings of evolution. Yeah, thinking of, you know, insects, not all, but some. Thinking of, you know, the more predatory type of animals. Yeah, there you'll find solitary existence more than in their higher developmental stages. That just on a side note, don't confuse, you know, like say tigers, for example, who are on the highest level of their species, you know, as the big cats. They tend to have a solitary being. However, that is just for the males. So the females, they act differently and they collaborate maybe only at specific times in their life cycle. Yeah, but there are some insects, for example, that, I mean, I'm not lying. There's a beetle that lives in the earth for 16 years before it finally comes out, you know, turns, you know, goes through metamorphosis, and only has 1 week to live and doesn't eat anything in that week. All it can do is try to find a mate, and then they die. Okay, there's a lot of insects that don't come to life to their highest evolutionary state to eat or live just for mating. You know, this is something that, you know, when you look at humans, how complex our being is and how we are designed, you understand better why thinking is such a big issue for us. Because as the only species on this planet, we have the ability to break free from our original programs, from our instincts, from our drive, yeah, from physiological, you know, genetically pre-programmed behaviors. We're the only species who can completely break free from that and choose that on our own. Yeah, so just for you to understand the miracle of being a human. Yeah, uh, it's a bit shallow, yeah, to regard humanness as something weak. We regard to being human in a sense of weakness, because all we see is the pre-programmed drive and instincts that we have, and they are not very far developed. But the cool thing about human or being human is that we have the potential, that we have the capability to break free from that via our consciousness. And we haven't even touched upon spiritual aspects of that yet, because the fact that we have a consciousness is what opens the gate to us actually tapping into something that's even higher than just our own thinking, the higher thinking. Yeah. So there are evolutionary steps that are ahead of us as a species that we are just about to discover. Yeah. So my plea here is to understand your own humanness not as something flawed, but as something that is just in sort of in an infant state of what your true higher potential could be as a human. Because we all have that potential via our consciousness. And that's why this moment when someone awakens to their own consciousness, begins to not just observe their own thoughts, but witness their own thoughts, is such a big evolutionary step in a person's life and lifetimes, if you will. But with all that said, and you know, the striving for higher goals, which require us to master these potentials, to master these skills that are needed, yeah, to manifest that in our life, that we haven't been taught yet. We're just now awakening to this. It's the moment when, you know, the 1.5-year-old baby or toddler looks in the mirror and says something along those lines, yeah, where they discover themselves in the mirror. It's a miracle. If you ask a neuroscientist, yeah, it's one of the coolest things, and that's the level of a primate, the evolutionary state. A primate can identify himself in the mirror. Yeah, that's as far as it goes in the animal kingdom. But we can do so many more things. We can think thoughts for ourselves. We can have our own thoughts. We can think new thoughts. We can have ideas. We can innovate. We can change. And that is higher potential. And when you then add the spiritual component to that, you'll figure out that, wait, where is this coming from? Question to you guys. Where is that consciousness coming from? Why do we have that, but, you know, animals don't? What are your thoughts on that? Any ideas? Any new thoughts that you haven't thought before? Okay, you're deep in thought. Nice. That's my objective of doing these workshops. What is consciousness? I mean, it's just a word, but, you know, it's sort of a realm. We're talking about awakening to consciousness, witnessing our own thinking. It's got to come from somewhere.
Isn't it the all-knowing of the all-oneness from the higher source?
Okay, the all-knowingness and one that's too new agey for me. Okay, and while it's not untrue, I'm just going to be a stickler here right now because I want you guys to get to this place in a clean way. But the second part, the source part, that was the question. Yes, and the question that I asked was, what is the source? There's got to be a source of it, because apparently we have that in us. And how do we call that in common language, not New Age language? How do we call this in common language?
Is it creator from whatever thought process you come from? So God or...
Yeah, that's the personification of it. But it's right. You're on the right track there, Linda. We call this spirit. Spirit, right? So there's something sort of, there's a higher pay grade. Yeah. And that's part of us. That's why we call this spiritual investigation or spiritual thinking, or, why is that? This has nothing to do, the English language unfortunately has hijacked the word spiritual as either something new agey or something religious. But the original meaning, and this is something, I've learned Latin in school. Yeah, I've had to read all the Latin stuff and the stuff that came from the Greek translated into the Latin. The word spirit is a non-denominational word. It doesn't necessarily mean God. It just means that part in us that is basically inspirited, yeah, where we suddenly become access to a new realm of thinking, perceiving, and existing. And that's also where, our higher goals come from, because, if you have enough money, if you have tons of people around, and, you have your 9-to-5 life and everything is going fine, yeah, let's say you're not experiencing any resistance on your ego level, yeah, you got all your needs met. We don't stop there, do we? Then we start searching for higher goals. No, we want more true love, or, we want more peace, we want more harmony, we want things that have nothing to do with survival. And that's the main distinction here. This is something that you need to understand, that your thinking, for as long as it is geared to it or aligned to survival, follows a pre-programmed framework, a pre-programmed mindset. And that's good so, all right, because, what do we know? All we know is, what our parents teach us, and how, the smaller collective or society that we are born into, how they do things. That's all we know. Until when? Until we go to experience different societies, or different ways of thinking, or different religions, or different ethnic groups, or just, until we have relationships. Until we realize that there's many different ways. And that typically happens, in our adolescence, that we realize, oh, wait, there's also other ways. And then follows the phase, developmentally, when we start, sort of making choices. We say, okay, but I like mac and cheese, So what determines if a person sticks with the old program or is willing to accept, or not necessarily accept, but willing to explore other concepts, mindsets, frameworks. So what determines that? What do you guys think? How did it go with you? When did you start thinking outside the box, guys? Outside your, say, parental or, nuclear family box? When did that happen for you?
One of the times that it happened for me is your discussion on ego, and I hadn't recognized that before.
All right, but go a step back. Before you could even listen to a discussion or workshop about ego that I did, there must have been other things that happened before that. So you must have had some kind of impulse for, even being interested in that, being interested in this sacred self-healing topic. What led to you being interested in this sacred self-healing topic?
Maybe just dissatisfaction with where I was at.
Okay, that's a big one. Yes. So some kind of dissatisfaction or something that you felt within yourself, where you could clearly feel, wait, this isn't going the way it's supposed to be, right? Or there's more. Something along those lines, Linda? Like that, you're not living your full potential.
Yes, it's there's more and the
There's
potential.
more. So you were looking for more. So up until then, is it, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but is it safe to say that, you followed the program?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So for most of us, I mean, I happen to know that you're a woman and that you have a child and that you're married. So, for most of us women, for example, it's like, okay, you go to school, you learn something that you can use to make living, and then, you get married and you focus on family, raise children or not, and then what? You try to get back into what you originally learned.
Yeah, it was the then what. So everything's covered, everything's followed by the rules, but the then what.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Uh-huh. So doing the program means that you get somewhere in your life. I mean, it's not that you're screwed if you follow the program, but there is and then what? Right? It's somehow the purpose is missing, the higher purpose. Yeah. It's just sort of a series of tasks that we have to fulfill, none of which actually originated within ourselves. So that moment of dissatisfaction, or the moment of sort of feeling that there is more, yeah, or trying to find the more. What else? What are other examples that can lead to us starting to question our mindsets or the programs? What was it for you guys?
Jona, I have a question. Some people are born just kind of already not going to follow the program. I mean, I kind of get that sense from me a little bit, but at the same time, I think I was brought slowly and almost, I can't say tragically, but brought to it through
Like a series of
I think
unfortunate
not.
events.
Yeah, precisely. I was fitting in, but I kind of wasn't fitting in, and I was really fitting in, but my health was suffering for it. All sorts of things that, of course, like as a 16-year-old, I wasn't able to put my finger on just reading Glamour magazine and Vogue.
Yeah.
So there are, it all kind of got shaky, which it probably does for a lot of teens at that point. But yeah, your words were pretty good for it.
Coming back to your question, to your original question, Janet, nobody is born that way, because our survival depends on adapting to the programs and mindsets that are, in us in form of instincts, and that have to do with mirroring, with copying. Okay, so everybody has to go through these stages. Everybody.
That's good to know that perspective.
But there is, and this is more sort of the spiritual component, there's something that we can observe, and that is that there is an interesting combination of, say, trauma in a person's life, in some people's lives, that lead to a premature need to break free, because the circumstances that this person was born into were so hostile, say, or so unsafe, or so restrictive, yeah, that this dissatisfaction that Linda mentioned earlier, that sets in at a very, very early stage. And I called it prematurely. Yeah, so a lot of times, we have that when there's toxic or unhealthy family situations. That can make a huge difference in a person's sort of speed of awakening, because there's more sort of forcing elements. Yeah, they're situational or circumstantial, but you're being forced to change something, because if you stay where you're at, it's not safe, or it's too much pain. And I think that's what you're referring to. Yeah,
Yes, I think that is a good summary of it. Yes. I mean, to a certain extent.
yes, and even that is kind of common. Okay, because there's not a single person here in this world that hasn't experienced some form of, and it's all subjective and relative, trauma in those formative years. The spiritual component of that is that we look at karmic aspects, because there are some people who seem to have certain other programs that are not necessarily based on what they're experiencing, or what, like, say, their parents represent, or not necessarily on outer things, but that they bring in from within. So my answer was yes, or no, nobody is born with this ability to think outside the box. This is actually blocked. Our psyche blocks that, yeah, for survival purposes. Yeah, it's very important that we go through these, terrible twos, and the tantrum throwing, threes, and this sort of egotistical, sort of being until we're like 5 or 6. It's very important, because that's what connects us with our fundamental needs. Yeah, and they need to be met at that time, or else the human can't survive, because the human takes a long time to be mature enough to exist on his or her own. Yeah, so in species where where they reach adolescence quicker, yeah, that's different. But humans need 21 years. We need 21 years to be able to survive on our own. And even then, we become unhappy if you're alone. So we can, live in a hut in the mountains, and, try to make our living all on our own. But we will never have the feeling of joy or happiness. Yeah, these higher goals, they won't set in. So what I mean to say with that is that we all have to go through these stages in our life. Okay, and we all experience a certain level of discomfort at some point that then drives us to seek for more. Yeah, and for some people, it's karmic, and this happens very, very early in life. For other people, it happens a little later in life, but at the end of the day, we all arrive there, latest on our deathbed. So there is, from a spiritual component, a pre-programmed It's like a hidden program in us that we are supposed to awaken. We're supposed to awaken. But the way how we get there, that can be different. That can, happen in different life stages. That's very individual. But it is also in us. That's very important to understand as well. So as much as the ego is a program in us that we all have to have until a certain developmental stage, so is our consciousness. Did you guys all get that? Yeah, like that this is something that is part of our human existence. And what is different now, today, here in, the 21st century, than let's say, 500 years ago, or 1,000 years, or 2,000, or 5,000 years ago, is that first of all, we live longer. So that gives us more time to get there, doesn't it? Second of all, we have less physical labor. Drastically. I mean, even just within the past 100 years, even the past 50 years. And having less physical labor means that we have more time to think, we have more time to contemplate. The other thing is, and this is why I started the workshop this way, is that we have way more information to process now. When you sheep shepherd somewhere in the Alps or in the Andes or whatever, I mean, what do you have to process? Maybe the weather conditions of the day and, the names of your sheep and, if there's any predators around. Not to make fun of this. I want you to understand what the current conditions are and why this is leading to all of us getting into this sort of spiritual emergence. Yeah, so there's different external factors that lead to that. But there's also something else, and that is that we are feeling this yearning, this desire for peace, for love, for freedom. And that then, when that kicks in, all right, and you guys are all there, all of you. You wouldn't be here if it hadn't kicked in with you long before you even found me or transCODES. Yeah. When that kicks in, that means you're going to have to learn new ways of harnessing this, of working with this. Because suddenly, and maybe Linda, you were willing to confirm this for me, everything that you believed in up until then suddenly gets questioned. Whether it's, you said following the rules or, whatever, God and the world, how one is supposed to be as a mom, as a woman, blah, blah, blah. All that suddenly gets questioned, isn't it?
Yes, beautifully.
Well, Linda, stay with me here for a sec, because you're so open today. Everybody else is kind of hiding. Do you remember the moment? You mentioned the example with ego. What happened to you?
It was in the meditations where I was hearing them over and over again and just understanding what ego was and being able to watch from outside. It was just a totally new way of thinking for me.
And what were some of the, like, I mean, it's not always comforting, right? So we all are aware of this. What were some of the things that you started to question? What were some of the things that came up for you? Were you like, how do I know this is good for me?
Well, it was really easy for me because I started the meditations with a pain level of 12 out of 10.
Physical pain, right? You're talking about physical pain. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even just the message was so positive, and the identification of the level of tension in my body and all of those things. So that's sort of an artificial, maybe, way to get into it, but I was sold. And then, just time and time and hearing and learning new skills and just finding them working.
Okay, so you had the luck to awaken through having a positive experience. Is that what I'm hearing? And that made
For sure.
you start looking for it more, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a different way, the opposite way of what Janet does, right? You had a positive experience, and then you're like, oh, I want more of that positive experience, right? If this can do this to my body, right? Well, maybe it can do other things for me as well, right? Maybe it
Right.
can
But
change
I
the.
also came into it not from a good place, right? So I came into it with a ton of pain and a feeling of there's got to be more, and a search for the more. And then, that getting rid of the pain or reducing the pain was just an easy access to say it's easy to do a lot more of this.
Right. But it's still a lucky entryway in that way, because you had an instantaneous, say, positive feedback,
For
right?
sure.
So like I'm not minimizing any of this. I know that there's often, but that was the motivation. The motivation was that you felt that some burden, or some, in this case, physical pain, started to go away. Okay. And once, especially when it comes to physical stuff, but this doesn't always happen for us in a physical way. But once we realize, like, oh, wow, there's different ways, there's new ways, there's ways that I have never explored before that could maybe bring about relief, or bring about more positive aspects, if you will. So I know this for a fact, that for many of you, this wasn't necessarily the case. Yeah, for many of you, there was the prompting there to question things first, and then you discovered, some of the things that, some of you even discovered your pain after you had the prompting. Is there anybody here who had that? Like, you had all this input and somehow you felt like something ain't right, but you couldn't really put a finger on it. And it wasn't until you then investigated sort of, what could be wrong here, that you found, maybe things such as, that your relationships are toxic, or, that the way you go about your goals in life and so forth, that needs an overhaul. Who had sort of a different order in that?
Well, I think I definitely did, Jona. And as you're talking more, my brain went, maybe I'm not awakened. So I don't know, all of a sudden. Scrambled eggs in my head.
Actually, that's a sign of being awakened, just so you know. Because the big conclusion is,
all that work for nothing.
Yes, the big conclusion is, oh, I thought I had this all figured out. I know nothing. Yeah.
Done something.
That is a very conscious thought.
Thank you.
And that is a thought that you thought. You thought this. That is your own insight. It's not a judgment, and it's no, it's that I want to commend you on that. I want you guys to understand what your own thoughts are. To question, oh, maybe I'm not awakened. That is a great conscious process. Yeah. And why? Because there was some kind of preoccupation with what it means to be awakened. Do you want me to, do you want to tell me, Janet? I mean, we're among another here. What did you associate, without questioning, that it means to be?
Right now we talk with all these mumbo jumbo lingo bingo things, just like, for instance, being a raw vegan or being vegan, like when these things were taking place for me, it wasn't so, like you said at the beginning of our workshop today, we didn't have so much information trying to, label everything and people actually talking that way. People take on the labels. That's what I find is kind of, I guess it's natural, but I still don't, I hesitate with it. So I
Yeah,
didn't
labels are
use like I'm awakened.
programs.
It wasn't until, well, I guess until I started getting into like walk into a spiritual bookstore and go, oh, this is so cool. Oh, this is so cool. And meditating. So I guess the best response would be some kind of awareness was somewhat when I started meditating, although was doing a lot of uh, therapy, therapeutic things as a teenager, and I put myself into some of that. And when I was in college, to help me with a lot of struggles, that I couldn't identify. I wasn't sitting there on the computer researching stuff. I was just doing my stuff, but having problems. So in that, I got more awareness. And I guess it's kind of like creaking the door open to awakening.
Yeah, and again, you can basically come to the conclusion that, your awakening process, yeah, the whole sort of path, from the very early beginnings was triggered by pain. Yeah, in your case, probably more like an emotional pain.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, that would be labeled that way very
yeah, because it led
accurately.
you to seeking ways that can heal you or that can help you, that can lift the burden. So it was Linda's initial motivation was to get relief from physical pain. Yeah, in your case, the what initiated you into like seeking, yeah, and looking outside the box was some kind of emotional pain. So, how you get there, quite frankly, is irrelevant. Yeah, because then as soon as you start to seek, which is which already implies that you're questioning what you had believed until then. Yeah, when you're seeking something, that means you're seeking for input. Yeah, what happens after that is attraction and resonance, right? We go to bookstores, we find books that we like, we read something, and that triggers something in us. And then I call this the breadcrumbs, right? And then you get inspired to read something else or to look into something else, and then comes, oh yeah, meditation, I could try meditation. And then you do meditation and something else comes, and then you talk to other people and they tell you what they've done, and then you try new things, and we start finding our way. We start finding our personal path. And that is a sign of awakening, because you no longer go in the cookie cutter way. You go in your own path. You're following the breadcrumbs, yeah, your own breadcrumbs, and they lead you to a basically continual, growth in having your own thoughts and insights. That is what awakening is. Whether we become a vegan on the way or wear red socks, that's just sort of my metaphor for, the labels. Yeah. If we do it because it feels better, yeah, then, and it comes out of our own insight, then there's nothing wrong with it. But if we do it because we think that this is the way how we look awakened, or become awakened, then there's a problem, because that's not a conscious choice. So when somebody, for example, diet is a very good example, decides to, let me ask you guys, who of you has changed their diet in the process of your consciousness development? Can you raise your hands? Who has changed their diet? Okay, that's That's almost all of us. That includes me. Julian, you type too much. I can't read all this while I'm talking. But I happen to know from you that you had several dietary changes in your life. What have these dietary changes, without the groups and stuff that are standing or that stood behind that, but how have they contributed to your awakening process? Do you want to share?
I think what you're asking, it's sort of like wanting to be aware, wanting to be awakened, seeing these people that looked really cool, that looked like they had it together, that were hippie types, being a vegan, meditating, sitting in lotus position. That was the seeking and the longing.
So copying that, right? At first, it's just a
Yeah.
copying, right? That's you
And then
think those are the experts, right? So you do it like that, right?
And belonging to a tribe, belonging to a group of people. I mean, I can see a lot of people that do that on social media. Oh, they're vegans and whatever, but they're
Right.
very unhealthy mentally.
Well, we don't need to judge this for now. We're doing a very neutral and scientific investigation, actually, of how we get to the place that we can think for ourselves and master our own thinking. And we've already established that we all go through phases where we just copy, where we just mirror. We're pre-programmed to do that. But my particular question to you was how these dietary changes. Would you like to share with us real quick what kind of different diets you've tried in that whole sort of big process?
Oh,
Started
out vegetarian, went to fruitarian extreme, then tried to be a breatharian, where was eating very little, just drinking coconut water and eating dates and so that was very extreme. Then got very unhealthy and had to go back to eating food. Then had a bit of goat, dairy. Then eventually eating a wide variety of things and not having such a trip about food.
So this is where you're today, right? You have come to your own, whatever feels best for you.
Yeah.
Yes, through all these different experiments, through all the different copying, right? At first it was all just copying, then you made your own experience, and now you're at a place where where you're more in balance with it. It's not as extreme or as imbalanced as it used to be. So this is all normal, guys. I want you all to understand this. This is a great example.
Making conscious decisions of what we eat in the moment.
Yeah.
It's actually a conscious choice.
It should be, based on what it feels like to us. Yeah. Just not to go too deep into like these groups and stuff like that. That's a whole different topic. But in these times, Julian, when you were imbalanced, when it was too extreme, what kind of things did you experience there? Like how your will or how your choices, weren't really yours anymore.
No, that's right. Influenced. The decisions are influenced by outside. It's sort of like the choice to make decisions wasn't coming from within. It was to get something, to get to a higher state, to be free of pain and suffering. When I actually wasn't facing it, I was actually using food as an excuse to well, if I just drink coconut water and don't burden my body with any food, I'll become enlightened or something like that.
Yes,
so it was never facing anything, and the outside was telling me, oh, you're not doing it right, or you need to have this sort of food or whatever.
Right.
Drink water
until
go and drink water for 3 days, you'll feel better, you know. It's like
yeah, those are great
it never
examples.
worked.
Yeah, those are great examples. But the point here is that if the motivation is a different one than, let's say, something that can that is healthy for us, that is balanced, that is in harmony with us, if it's not that, if that's not the motivation for doing things, right? What happens then is that we get into a really imbalanced place with ourselves, and that can lead to a whole bunch of other problems. But the point that I wanted to make is that, you know, whatever it is that you feel attracted to, and let's say that you follow for a while, there are no mistakes. You know, Julian, I don't know if you can say this about yourself. I can say this about myself today, that this is just the way I am. I have to learn it the hard way. I have to experience it myself, and that's how I come to insights. That's the way I am. Okay. Not in regards to foods. That story for me went differently than for you. But can't you? I mean, wouldn't you say that you're kind of glad that you had all these experiences, because now you know,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And there's no judgment now. Before,
Yeah.
I would judge myself for being so silly, for
No.
like, oh God, how messed up was I? It's like, no, all these experiences, um, the, the judgment is not there anymore. Because it's a reference feeling. So I can recognize now when it was a program choice, that is a reference feeling within me. I can see how now I actually got pulled and caught into these choices
Mhm.
through, well, you know, outside causes. It's sort of like, what is,
Or other motivations, like wanting to belong. That can be a huge, big motivation for people, you know,
yeah,
to doing things. And there's nothing wrong with the need to wanting to belong. It's just, you know, that we have to become a little more conscious as to like how much, you know, we are deviating from our own needs and wants. Yeah, how much are we willing to give to belong, or how much are we willing to give ourselves up for belonging, right? And that has to be experienced. I love how you use the word reference feeling.
yeah.
Because
And there's no substance. It's not doing it for anything but the ego or the belief for error perception, false beliefs. There's no substance in doing that to myself and subjugating my body to such intense
no,
practice.
but
Through,
because it was so extreme in your case, that's why I'm so glad that you're sharing. You also have experienced the power of your own ego and self-deception, because while you were
exactly.
doing it, right, you believed 100% that that is the way to go.
Yes.
Until you said something along those lines, that your body got really sick, until you got other signals, right, from yourself, okay, that showed you it can't be good for me, right? And then you were forced to change. Today you are a healer yourself, okay, and that's really important for those of us who also feel that need to maybe wanting to serve others. Yeah, that we honor all our experiences, all the extremes, and all the things that we have done in our own life, even if they turned out to be, you know, not the right thing for us. Yeah, but this helps you, for example, Julian, right? It helps you to identify when somebody else is on like an extreme path, right? You have become an expert in extreme paths because you've gone down those extreme paths, and you can see this now. That's how you can be of service to others, by helping them to bring back more balance and more harmony. Yeah, that was a little extra message for you there. Yeah, so if we copy, yeah, it's the same as, you know, go to school, getting married, have kids, you know, without us actually consciously choosing that and observing how that plays out in us, we cannot really be sure that it is us. That's the whole point here. Tina, you're raising your hand. Do you want to share? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you do.
I didn't know I didn't know it was right. Sorry.
Oh, okay, okay.
No,
It's
yeah.
a hand from
No,
earlier.
I've changed my diet quite a lot, and
Uh-huh.
it's clearly in the wrong direction. I can feel that now. It's I feel sick most of the time, so I need to.
Without going into details, why, so you changed your diet. Was there a certain mindset or belief why you had to change your diet, or why you thought that would be the best?
I can't remember why I thought it would be the best, but it was like I was going along with an idea that it was the best thing. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you guys just gave us a perfect example. Tina, thank you. That's a great way of saying that. Yeah, you were following along an idea. And some of these ideas may have been cool, and some of those weren't. And you found out that it wasn't the best for you. I want you all to know that that is how you come to insights. That is how you apply consciousness. Because nobody can tell you, Julianne, or you, Tina, now, that this or that diet, yeah, only eating fruits or only drinking coconut water is the right way for you. Correct? Nobody can tell you that now. You would know that that's not true. Is that correct? You would have a very clear, nope. I know for sure that this is not good for me. I know that this doesn't work for me. This is how you form your own insights. And that has to do with you having experienced something, having thought something through on your own. That is what a conscious thought, a conscious insight is.
And it's very clear. And that clarity,
Super clear. Yeah.
that clarity is a feeling. And there's no obstacle, there's nothing pushing up against the clarity. To go into clarity around things, or to have epiphanies, I suppose, in the moment. That is that's like the longing, the state to be in, to feel that. When there's a discrepancy, when there's something feeling not quite right, or there's an incongruence, it's easier to identify once we've had those moments, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Every single time you had a conscious insight, something in you clarified. And you did a beautiful description here of that moment when you have an insight. It's a moment that comes with absolute clarity and something like peace, because you no longer have to question it. When you have that, guys, that's when you connected with your consciousness. It's your consciousness. That is when you know what you have here as, a reference feeling, as a choice, is yours. Now, does this ever stop? Yeah, we're coming to an end here, and I want to, that's why I gave this long intro, because this is a whole series of workshops. So obviously the workshop isn't ending here. We just have to stop after an hour and a half because it gets too long. But let me conclude this workshop with a question to you. Does this ever stop? Does this ever end, that process of you forming more consciousness?
Yeah, that question I've asked myself over and over and over again.
What is the preliminary
It's been
answer?
a driving force many times in the last 30 years.
Oh, okay, it's a driving force. That's another
Okay,
hallmark of
does it stop?
Okay, and what's your preliminary result?
I think it just become more kind of, I guess, callous. I don't know if it callous isn't right because it applies too much to like a hard heart, but it just becomes more like, the word just slipped away. Resilient, I think, maybe more stretchy and more like, and maybe things are actually going better, or that kind of outcome of like, oh, I did this nicely and then this is coming out nicely, or look at that beautiful miracle. Like a little more miracles show up in life where you don't expect it. So maybe it actually does kind of start to balance out into something that's a little bit more pleasant. That's the best I can say.
Okay, so here I want to, because these workshops are trainings, yeah, and this particular workshop is a training in clear thinking. Okay, and I want to use your statement because this is what I do when you share, you know, and I say something, I'm helping you to discern. I want to take your statement, Janet, and divide that into two different thought processes.
Great.
One is the fact that it's a driving force. You said that with absolute 100% conviction, and it's absolutely clear that this is a driving force in you. Okay. And then there was a second element to that, and that had to do with you. Apparently, that's just what I'm reading through the lines here, just taking your statement, that it's an unpleasant process. That there's a part of you that doesn't actually quite enjoy that, doesn't like it. Okay, because there's maybe pain, or you know, all these questioning and the things that thinking outside the box, having to change mindsets and so forth. The ego experiences that as an unpleasant experience. Okay, so, and then you mentioned the word resilience, or something like a trajectory. You said something like along those lines. It's getting easier as you go, right? So two fundamentally different perspectives on the same thing, and you know, your experience, and that is that it gets easier. But what actually gets easier is not the thinking, because the thinking is always possible. Yeah, you always have the power to think for yourself and come to conclusions and have insights and so forth. But your ego doesn't always like it. Okay, so what gets less is the battle between that driving force, yeah, to become more conscious, and the ego, or the emotional attitude to it. Can you follow me? Those are two different.
Yeah, I think there's some elements playing into it that we're not focusing on, and the thinking part of it is very, it's really what's revelationary kind of, in that the fact that it's like, oh, I think there's part of me that really wants to think for myself, and then like what you said, I think there's a bit of a conflict there of me not wanting to think for myself, because I never thought of it that way. So that's kind of what's so funny. But to see that all in the context of independent, connected thought does bring up a bit of a shuffle on the battlefield. Yeah.
And most of that, and you've already identified this, most of that is based on judgment, you know, like judging yourself for, you know.
Yeah, like the expectation. It's a whole other, it's like a whole little illusion, and you're like, oh, whoa, there goes the bubble pop.
Right. But I want you to, from here on, I want you to take these insights that you had here today, all of you, yeah, and start to look at this in a little more differentiated way. Okay. You have your thinking that you just sort of discovered, yeah, that you have your own thinking, and you have the willingness. It's a force in you, yeah, that makes you willing to question that. But then we also have our emotions. Yeah, we have our, you know, pleasures and pains and so forth, and it kind of has to align with that, right? There are certain things that we want to think. You ever thought about that? We want to think certain things. So if you have an insight, yeah, and all of a sudden, you run into a combobulation or resistance, yeah, you just said that, Janet, sometimes you may not even want to think in certain ways, in different ways, right? You want to keep your old thinking. Yeah, it's not conscious, it's all unconscious. Then you see that the second level of self-mastery here. It's not enough to just investigate this from a thinking perspective, but it starts with the thinking, guys. We have to first secure that what our thoughts are, that they are coming from us. We have to make sure that our thinking is ours. And that is, a lifetime. The second aspect of self-mastery is to learn how to gear, how to harness the emotions about that, what it triggers in us. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about this in the next workshop, because the next workshop is about that. But even that is not enough, because then it also comes to, how congruent are we in living our lives that way? How, our expressions, how do we communicate what we think, what we believe, what we feel? There can be a major mismatch here on that level that can hinder us from, manifesting our consciousness in our 3D life. And then there comes even another challenge, namely, fully realizing our higher goals. Not just, oh yeah, I want more happiness, I want more money, I want more love. Sure, we all say yes. When you are asked, do you want more money? Do you want more love? Yeah, everybody will say yes. But it has to be conscious. In what way? How do you want that? And then the last and the most difficult level of self-mastery, guys, is the mastering of your will, to actually have the discipline, to actually have the structure and the control over what it is that you're thinking, emoting, expressing, what your intention is, and how you put that out. Will, not as in willingness, but will as in your ability to make a stance. Say, this is who I am. This is what I think. This is what I feel. This is what I need and want. And this is how I'm bringing this into this world. And this is why I'm doing this. Realizing the higher goals has to do with purpose. Yeah? To know who you are. And to know, like I often call this, to know what you do. To know what you're doing. When it all comes together. So today we investigated the first aspects of thinking for ourselves. Independent connected thinking, as you called this. But it's not enough. It's not enough to just think things. Yeah? It's not enough to just know things. But it is a prerequisite to learning more about how we feel about what we're thinking and what we're experiencing, and that's what we're going to cover in the next workshop. So I want you to know that what we are doing here, what we are, investigating here together, is a very high level of consciousness training. But it is, from an evolutionary standpoint, it's the gate that we arrived at as humans, because it is what we are experiencing subjectively, individually, as a force. We want to master this. This is literally the beginning of us as sort of a higher evolutionary version of being a human. Yeah, we are in the process of growing into that. Nice. Thank you for your comments, Linda. I read what you said. You're feeling much more clear now. Yeah. So these are obviously just, you know, cues and prompts that I can give you here in such a group setting. Yeah. So with the Heart Warriors, for example, I practice that on a weekly or bi-weekly level, because just the fact that we're awakened is not quite enough yet to, you know, be able to manifest that in our life as sort of new life's conditions, as conscious living. Yeah, so that is something that is an ongoing process for all of us. But there are some mechanics and some laws to that that we first have to get informed about. We have to understand that, how it works. Okay, and then it becomes a lot easier. Like you said, Janet, yeah, there's more resilience, but also a deeper understanding of why things sometimes have to be the way they are, or why they had to be the way they were. I know that about my life story, which on a scale of pleasantries, you know, is definitely in the lower third area. Okay, but it is what has brought me here. Without that, without the unpleasantries or trauma or say negative experiences, or, you know, like Julianne, learning through experiencing, through conscious, you know, experiencing and witnessing, and then realizing, well, that was all crap. Okay, next, you know, let's try that again. That is what forms higher consciousness in us, and it's ultimately also what connects us with our spirit and the greater spirit, if you will, because there's a reason why we feel that awakening of consciousness, or why we feel this inspiration at a certain point in our life, because it's part of our soul's plan. Yeah, and it's part of sort of the greater spirit that is there. Yeah, last thing here, the question, Julianne, that you're asking, not sure how you or what you're inquiring about. You're saying feeling the obstacles, resistance.
Oh, I'm just thinking like the state of like actively seeking awareness, like feeling when there's resistances or there's obstacles that come up. I think that's the uncomfortableness of like actually going into, going into that and feeling it and actually allowing it to be there, and then.
Well, we have to learn how to master it. I mean, it's a normal part of growing up spiritually. You know what I mean? I mean, when we're a 5-year-old, you know, we imagine a world with, I don't know, ice cream and, you know, playing all day long. And then when we're 18, we figure out that that's not how life goes. Do we like it? No, of course not. Because, you know, a world where we don't have to worry about money and just can have ice cream every day and don't gain any weight and don't need to worry about health would be a lot nicer, wouldn't it? Right? Yeah, so that's the part in us that resists. It says, yeah, but I don't want it that way. Yeah. Even though, you know, we all know that eating ice cream all day long wouldn't really be a very healthy choice. That wouldn't really be that good of a choice. So what we want and what we can and what we end up doing, those are things that we have to become more aware of. Without making those things in life, those manifestations, more conscious, we will never know. We will never know if it is ours or something external. We will never know if we have been manipulated or mind controlled or coerced or persuaded. We will never know. So as we are all embarking on this journey of conscious living, which is driven by our search for truth, our search for, happiness or more peace in life. We also need to understand that that is obviously a lot of work. The ego, is just a fail-safe. That's just for the case that we do not wake up. But because you already woke up, now you need to keep going. You can't go backward anymore. You can't unknow, unfeel what you're already feeling. All I'm saying is it's all normal, but don't struggle too much. Just learn the mechanics of that. Just do the work, to understand, these things that I present here in sort of this way of logic to you, so that you can master these steps by yourself through practice. The choices are all yours. Just know the way how to get there. So obstacles will always be there, and these obstacles, they come from, the pre-program that is in us, and that is avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. And you guys all know what kind of program that is. That is an ego program. It's the fail-safe. So if you avoid pain and seek pleasure all your life, you're going to be able to survive. But you're not necessarily going to be happy, because happiness cannot be achieved, cannot be accomplished through avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. At the end of that road, at the end of ego road, is not happiness. So that's why we're going to have to leave it here, and I'm looking forward to the next workshop with you guys. Please feel free to share. We're going to have a thread in the forum for this with the recording. I'm going to send you the link for that, and please feel invited to comment and share your insights with us, and also maybe what got triggered here through these kind of conversations. Maybe what kind of questions are coming up in you, or what kind of new ideas have formed through this way of more clearly thinking. Okay. I hope you guys are not too fried now. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I see you on Friday for the energy updates, and the next webinar is going to be in about a month from now. Okay. Thank you all for coming here. Thank you for watching or listening, and special thanks to all of you who shared. Yeah. Wonderful. Bye-bye.